I should have probably introduced myself earlier when I was up here introducing the last speakers, but my name is Ilima Long, and I was asked to help coordinate Nanakuli University, so that's my role here today. But I also used to coordinate the discussion tents at La Hoi, so it's an awesome thing to see that these educational pieces are now just part and parcel, whether we're occupying a mountain or celebrating our national holidays. This educational component always seems to be built in at this point, which makes a lot of sense because we are all here because of education and our fight to reclaim our educational spaces, which is a perfect segue into our next speaker who needs no introduction in this school and in this community. But we're really excited to make sure that some time was carved out for Dr. Kalehua Krug, who is the principal here at Waihona Naʻauao Public Charter School, to share about the kula and his vision. When I first learned that Kalehua was the new principal at Waihona, like my mouth fell to the ground, and in just thinking about the potential of a public educational space under the leadership of this Kanaka who has been a kia'i and a builder and, just a committed warrior for Olelo Hawaii and Ike Hawaii, that it's in an accessible way as well. It's always about making it accessible to our communities. So you're not here to see me talk. So anyways, please help me welcome Dr. Kalehua Krug, and thank you so much.
Mahalo. You guys can hear me okay? Yeah. Well, I spoke a little bit earlier, again, and so just as an introduction, my name is Kalehua Krug. I came to this job, how Ilima was describing, because I spent a lot of time in town. I spent a lot of time driving past Nanakuli while it's dark in the morning and coming home while it's dark at night. And that was because of the belief that I carried as a youth that I could make a difference, a bigger difference at the University of Hawaii, where I worked for a little while, and then in the Department of Education within the system. And I learned in my wisdom of experience that it's the greatest impact that we can make is at the ground level. And there are multiple points in education that we have to consider as, for a lack of better term, a battleground. And one of them is preschool to kindergarten up to about 3rd grade. And so winning that, and the battle I'm talking about is a battle of worldview. And it's a battle of the development of an indigenous ideology. And so as a student, emerges into the 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I'm not calling it impossible, but there's a lot developmentally that we've learned over the years about how the brain develops and how children develop. And so we've got to win that battleground. And I wasn't winning that battleground at the university, and I wasn't winning that battleground in the system. And so I decided to come home and spend time in my place while the sun is up. And that came to be one of the most significant decisions I've made. And so being here at Waihona, and I say that because that's what the importance of a school like this for me as an individual is founded upon, and my understanding of the movement that schools, especially public charter schools in Hawaii, and the impact that the schools have made in that vein. And so, Waihona o ka Naʻauao, for all of you folks, that means the container of education, the container of knowledge, the place where we store our knowledge. And that was the call on the 2001 and 2002 upon the inception of this school by a group of community members, elders now, that had a vision. And I'm going to share that vision really quickly with you folks, so that you folks know I am going to be talking about charter schools. I am going to be talking about the concept of Hawaiian educational ideology. But you're going to see that everything has to have a frame and a foundation. And for our school, this is our frame and this is our foundation. And so the guiding ideology is here. That I'm going to try the subtitles just in case. Ka Waihona o ka Naʻauao will offer a schooling experience that is viable alternative to the existing conventional public school model. And I'm going to let you folks read the rest, but I want to highlight that while you're reading that. I describe to our staff, and I describe to anybody who cares to listen to me, that as a public charter school, we are not here to mimic the Department of Education. We are a satellite of the mothership, which is the Board of Education. That is where we get our funding from, and there are certain compliance rules that we gotta walk through without any choice and without any question, because it's established in law, and we do use funds from the state. With that said, however, part of our charge is to be something different. We're not to build an institution that just mirrors or mimics that of the schools, other schools of this geographic area. And that's really important as a public charter school, and really important during events like this to make sure that we understand this is a part of our kuleana. This is an alternative. This is a viable alternative to education right here outside, and that's a part of our purpose. And our mission is to create socially responsible, resilient, and resourceful young men and women by providing an environment of academic excellence, social confidence, and Hawaiian cultural awareness. So we have three components. And these three main tenets are the academic tenet, our social tenet, and the cultural tenet. And what we've gone through, what I've learned over the last couple of years, and as I share about the vision of where this school is going, and how we tether to events like this and causes like this, is because the academic tenet, for our intents and purposes in this conversation, has been what we focused on. It is what most schools focus on. It is what the Department of Education focuses on. And when times get hard, we pull health, PE, art, music, we pull all of it. And culture itself, in any form, gets thrown to the back burner, especially Hawaiian culture. And so for our school, again, we return back to our purpose. We are not to mimic the Department of Education schools, and therefore, because we've done, prior to my hire here at Ka Waihona, the school has put a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of money into the academic development side. And academic excellence comes in a package that is recognizable through our expectations that we learned in our society. This is the academic tenet that we've been raised, bred, taught through day-to-day life, looks like math, science, language arts, and social studies. And so for us, in that academic vein, we build, and we have built, a large pot of money, we have built a large pot of effort, and we've put a lot, prior to my hire, to that. That's what the school has been about. And I think that many folks in the community have held the idea that Ka Waihona is a Kamehameha School's feeding program, feeder school. And I think we might still be, depending on where KS decides to go, if they decide to actually commit to culture. But for our school, we have three tenets. And I describe how we've gone about the tenets like the reception bars on a telephone. So the highest bar is the academic tenet. We put a lot of money, a lot of time to academics, math, science, language arts, social studies. The social tenet and the Hawaiian cultural tenet, not so much. And we can tear down our budget, we can look at how we expend, we can look at where our thoughts and our heart goes, and our heart does not naturally go as a school, as an institution to Hawaiian culture, but it's changing. And so therefore, in this, this is the build-up for how I'm describing to our school stakeholder community why we're putting so much effort up front to Hawaiian culture is because that's the tenet that we haven't addressed. That's the keiki we've been ignoring. And so to get all those reception bars, the social tenant and our cultural tenant up to equity so that all of our tenants are being addressed in the same way, this is where we're going. And so the basics to this is that the Hawaiian cultural development is going to be set first and foremost for our school. As you can see, events like this help to shepherd in ideas and again tether our school and our curriculum to these types of events that help us to learn our history and to learn our culture and the importance of culture. And so the Hawaiian Cultural Development Movement at our school is going to be focusing on, number one, converting facilities into aina, and I'll share what that means, and building a cultural optic, cultural events and practices, reconnecting to shift values and behaviors of our kupuna. Olelo Hawaii, accessing an indigenous worldview. And again, I'm going to share with you folks in that development that there are tangible, notable events and indicators that we're going to mark our progress upon. So the first idea, the facilities as aina, is that we've gone as an educational system into a realm where we have to get the parents have to sign up, parent approval, to go to places that we label as aina. We have to order buses, and we got to get on the buses, and we got to ride to the aina. And when we get to the aina, we work on the aina, then we get back on the bus, and we come back to school. And school and aina are not the same thing. And so the first level, the first shift, is turning our facilities into that, into aina. And so what we've done here for about a year now, and throughout COVID, we've been slowly progressing forward. But we're looking at the invasive species on our planet, on our honua. I call it, but it's our honua kula. But on our kahua kula, on our facilities, we have invasive trees. We have invasive plants. And to make room for the native plants, we first remove some of the invasive species. And so with that, as the invasives come down, the natives come up. And that is, and I don't know if you guys, the folks that live in Nanakuli and pass by, had some big trees came down. And had some folks that was angry at that. But I use that as an example is because I had a conversation with an elder in the community that those trees have a legacy, and I just question what the legacy is. And so by bringing those trees down, new trees will grow. And so we've planted 8 new ulu trees up in the front along Farrington Highway to take the place that we love our meakanu. But again, the progression here is that we have to address native ways. You're gonna see this concept, the analogy that I'm building shows up in education as well. And so it's turning our place where we've started planting our kalo, we've put up our mala, we've dug out an imu, we've put our la'i, we've put our mai'a in the ground. And so we're gonna turn, if we're gonna spend all the money that we do on water, it's not gonna be to turn our campus into a golf course, it's gonna be to turn our campus into a farm. And in that movement, turning our facilities into aina, the kids can be host to schools that don't have that opportunity. And we don't have to conceptualize aina as being separate from ourselves. We ourselves can be that aina. And so these are some guiding questions that we share for our students, but making sure that as we include our children in this forward progress, that those in the age range of kindergarten to 3rd grade are building their worldview. And that worldview is exemplified first by the optic. The second stage is really looking at what are our curricular focal points, and what cultural events do we use in that optic to frame our education on. And so one of them is a aha aina. And so in this, shaping the behaviors and shaping the way that children see education is guided by the terminal outcomes or the benchmarks of the learning. And so if we look at Strive High, if we look at state standards, if individual standards and individual test scores are our measure, our students see themselves as individuals. They are not members of a larger society or a larger collective or a larger lahui that needs to work together to save our place. They're not, and we're never going to get there. So as we move forward, it's setting these benchmarks, and one notably is our aha'aina. And a aha'aina is like a banquet. And it's a banquet that recenters the idea of receiving versus giving. That we have a prevalent ideology in our society, in our systems, that receiving and what you can get out of something, what you can get out of education, and how much money you can make, and what type of job you can get, that's a part of the development of that ideology, of the worldview of the child. And we're not moving in that direction. And I'll be clear with everybody, we're not moving in that direction. And if this isn't the choice for those families, if those families want to focus on that, this will not be the place. And I'm adamant about that. That if you want your children to be a part of a larger collective, to be a part of a larger community, that's what our focus is on. And our curriculum will show it. That the aha'aina is something that you will learn hula, you will learn songs, we will feed fish, we will catch fish, we will collect salt, we will grow kalo, we will feed a pig, we will make the imu. Everything will be done to give away. What you get in return is the feeling inside of being a part of a loving community. That's what they get. And I hope that's clear. Because in this, leaving our place better than we found it, that's a lesson that has to be lived over and over and over. You cannot drive on a bus to Ka'ala Farms, hear it one day, come back, and it doesn't live here. It has to live daily. That's the only way it can be established in a worldview or an ideology of a human being. And that's how we're going to win. Whatever win looks like, that's how we're going to win that that war is against the worldview. And individual success and collective success, that your individual success still has a place, but it has a place within a collective, and nature is a part of our collective. And just notably, that looking at reestablishing and renormalizing these values is based off of data. And I'll share with you, a phrase, but it's based off of the data that our kupuna have collected over thousands of years on how to live here. And we're going to utilize those behaviors to make these shifts, and the aha'aina is at the core. We're going to bring more Olelo Hawaii to our campus. And so what we have done already is that our middle school has always had an Olelo Hawaii teacher. We have instituted an Olelo Hawaii teacher for our elementary students. So Olelo Hawaii will be implemented and instituted from kindergarten. And how it shows up in Papahula is mele and mo'olelo, and it's about being able to develop and have an understanding of place names so that you don't have a sense of stranger danger when you look into the mountain. That the mountain has a name and you're familiar with it. You live there and it lives with you, so therefore you are part of it. And that's the familiarity that comes through learning mo'olelo and learning our mele. Grappling with olelo no'eau is accessing the ancestral wisdom of this place. And so through those ancestral teachings, the kids get an understanding of a different worldview. And in the worldview that we're trying to establish here, reestablish here, it's based upon, again, those folks from this place who were the last people that appropriately took place of the entire environment for all of us to thrive. And I say that over and over here on campus because that has to be our charge. It cannot just be Ike Hawaii, Olelo Hawaii, Iola Ka'ula Hawaii, so for a language to live. That's not enough. It's not enough for our language to live. The language has to give us something back in return as we honor it in speaking it. And what we take back in return is learning its worldview, and what's embedded in it, and extracting those ancestral wisdoms that come from Olelo No'eau. So some of the notable indicators of progress, as I mentioned, the aha'aina. So it's having a curricular focus on teaching to giving and not receiving. It has a curricular focus on engaging with our families, being appreciative for what we have been given by our community and our home life. And the aha'aina, again, is a focal point for giving back to our families and giving back to those that we receive so much from. A farmer's market. And I bring that farmer's market up is because we don't have one yet, but we're moving there. And why we need to move there is because in this preconceived understanding of the real world, the quote-unquote real world, even though reality is malleable, there is still a concern about how to engage and how to transition through the societal shifts that I'm talking about. And one of them is to learn how to work with money and learn how to engage in the economic structures and systems of our quote-unquote societal reality. And so with that, what the farmer's market will do is after we plant all of our ulu trees and the kalo is up and the pig is fat and everything's growing and thriving, that we have a campus of production. And in the production, what do you do with that? Because now you're digging into the Hawaiianness of it. And so this farmer's market, that check box is so that you folks understand that we have this 1/3 a split in how we're going to utilize our campus production. Now, 1/3 of it is our kids are going to eat it. We're going to consume our work because the mana we put in, we need to put our mana back into our kino. And that's 1/3 of that product. The next third is that in the surrounding community, we're going to share and give because there's no way we could have grown any of these plants. There's no way that we could have gotten to school without our families, gotten to the places in our life without the support of other people. And so for those other people, we will take it and we'll share 1/3 of our product. And that final third is to teach with an ethic how to sell product and re-put or reinsert the funding that you get from that into more projects here on campus to continue down the ideological path of our school. And so the idea of self-sustainability is one that will be important, that we utilize that funding to fund our agriculture program. We use that funding to support our aquaponics program. And so therefore, in the cycle of everything, that we are going out to grab the food for the program and we feed the program, and the food itself lives. I mean, the process in that helps all of our projects live on their own. And so, again, talking about that real world concept, the kids will still understand economics, but you attach an ethic to it. And in the end, that ethic is going to be important even for the academic progress of our children. And so the aquaponics is in the same vein, is that we will learn about science, we will learn and engage with the living plants and the animals that live in that system as that microcosmic view of an ahupua'a. That our campus, I use aquaponics to talk more about the ahupua'a-like appearance and the characteristics that we have here. We have a freshwater spring source of Honinivai over here near Nanakuli. We have access to the reef, and there's a lot of, there should be limu kohu, but we have kala, we have some palalaha out on the reef, and I'll get to the reef restoration side, but what the aquaponics program does is it starts the process by which children interact with plants and fish. Because that, when introduced at the right point in time in the life of the child, becomes how they see the interaction. And so therefore, when you move out from the aquaponics system, you're going to see, oh, kalo and limu. Hey. And then you start to broaden out the view and spread out how the kids see the ahupua'a of our campus. And so, again, utilizing the concept that we have access nearby to fresh water, we have plants as uka, and we have access to the reef as kai. And so we can see how we impact the ocean. And as you move children through that, again, it's more reinvigorating and reestablishing the worldview shifts that we're talking about. And so reef restoration, it's more than just fish. As far as reef restoration is that this is the concept that I asked some of the kids, like, how many of you guys fish? And almost all of them, hands went up. And then I asked them, how many of you guys ever fed the fish? No hands went up. And so the reef restoration is about this concept of educational reciprocity. that in these cycles of reciprocity, the children learn that I cannot ever just take. I always gotta give. I cannot ever just show up to someone's hale and not have mea'ai to bring. That's the cycle, and this is a cultural cycle. And it's a really simple cycle when I talk about it, but it's one that we've forgotten as a collective. I'm not saying everybody, but I know in education that we have to reestablish and reaffirm that cycle over and over and over and over, because we're not just teaching them the cycle, we're fighting against another ideology. So we've got this bridge program going on, and there's a battle inside that once they leave our campus, something else is reinforced. So when they come here, we got to fight against that and reinforce something different. And that's that cycle of reciprocity. So when we feed the kalo, the kalo can feed us. When we feed the fish, we get to eat the fish. And that's about a Hawaiian and indigenous conscience as well. So it's building that into the day-to-day life. And the reef restoration, what we've already done is that we're trying to clear our fence line, and the kids follow the machines and follow the saws and plant naupaka and pohuehue, and we're going to grab some, we have the pohinahina, grab some pohuehue and kauna'oa from over there and try to plant it on this side. But again, just following the machines in and reestablishing a new optic. And when the optic shows up, I'll share with you folks that during COVID, we had 2 Eva come back to our place. We've had a group of hunakai, a flock of hunakai come to our field in the back. So we're trying not to, even with PE, I'm telling the PE teacher, play on this side, don't play on the other side, let the birds stay. Because we're trying to build on the berm a place for them. We've had the ulili and we've had the kolea come back. And I know that I've seen akeke during the winter months here throughout the pandemic. But to bring them back, we need a really set place for them that we can treat delicately for them. And again, if we have burrows for the shearwaters, if the albatross come back, not only will that help them sustain themselves, but that will also help us sustain them. That when they come back, we can protect their place better. When they come back, we can get funding to make it better for them. And so that's the cycles of reciprocity that we're thinking through as we look at the concept of reef restoration. And then it is about tying kohu to the reef. It is about when we kuʻikalo, all of the stuff that we ihi, all of the ili, we throw into the ocean, and we rebuild a ko'a right outside our school, so that when we go and feed, we can actually see the fish come to eat. And that's what the kids have to see, is that when you feed, that they are nourishing the aina, they are nourishing the kai. And again, that's the feeling inside that we're extracting from all of these events. And then makahiki, going back into almost this idea of sanctity. And it's rebuilding that all of these things that I'm talking about are sacred. All of the times that we spend talking about our kupuna and their ways is sacred. And not in a kapu, stay away from me way, but in a really, really deep, ancestral, and wise way, that these types of feelings inside help the student to identify better with their place. And when you can identify better in your place, you end up treating it better. You enact a different story in your life and the decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis that no longer drive the plants and the animals away, but you invite them back. And that's really, for our world, what we're facing and what they're going to face. Because we might be okay. I might be okay. Maybe my kid's going to be okay. But one day, somebody in my ohana will have to face what we're doing right now societally. And so this is definitely reshaping and rethinking how we treat our world. And we are part of that world. And so makahiki reestablishes ceremonies to connect to the plants, to connect to our kupuna, to connect to sanctity, to connect back to the sacredness of education and learning and knowledge. Okay? And so that's the Hawaiian development. Now the social development, I'm going to say that you develop on the Hawaiian side, automatic, on a Venn diagram, you get mean overlap to the social side. That's social development. But we are going to look for, and we have this organization that we're working with, and we're in the process of building a bridge program to Hawaiianize what they're seeing, but they are very successful internationally. But one of the key components to what our educational system will focus on is about the consciousness of our inner ear versus our inner voice. Is that whatever we say to ourselves, and I've been practicing this with some of our youngsters, and they pick it up pretty quickly, that whatever we speak to ourselves is not always representative of what we need to do. It's a collection and a conglomeration of multiple ideas that we've absorbed from multiple sources of information, and we have to understand that the me of it is the ears. I get to hear it, and then I get to sift through all of it, and then I pick out the decision. And it goes back to the Hawaiian cultural development, is that when you re-identify with an indigenous worldview, you change the inner ear, and you hear things differently. That if someone wants to build more houses, you no longer just say, yeah, well, we got to, because humans need more places to live. You automatically leap into, I understand the need for houses. However, what about the birds? What about the pueo? What about the kahuli? What about the elepaio? What about the iliahi? What about the uhi, kawila? I can go on and on and on of the things that we've made decisions upon to drive away. And so in the social development, they've got to have a well-established inner ear that has that cultural ethic and that established on a Hawaiian indigenous worldview. And so that's where we're moving. And so we're just sharing this now in a more in-depth way with our teachers, so that our teachers are beginning to speak to this. And this is a day-to-day occurrence. The academic development, and I tell them, it's like, this isn't us cold turkey jumping off the bandwagon of school. Is that we still have our training. Our expertise as licensed teachers, as educators, come from training programs that teach us how to interact with children in a manageable space, in a four-wall classroom, to do those four core subject matters I was talking about before. So it's keep doing what we're doing in the way that we have, but shift from exactly where we've come from to now incorporate the bridging to where we're going. And part of that is in that integration space of culture is looking at the bridge programming is the Hawaii first. Now, when we're going to read something, we don't necessarily have to just take the leveled readers that we get from Michigan or Ohio or Indiana. We can actually look to the writings of our people. We can look to the books that have been written about things in Hawaii. Not just Hawaiian, it doesn't have to just be Hawaiian, but start to reel in our curriculum and re-centralize our focus as an identifiable indigenous focus. That on the child, the idea and the concept of belonging and identification to space and geography is important. And sometimes if our curriculum and our teaching doesn't talk to that, we move straight out into the world community, we become lost. And I believe many of our students, from what I've been observing, exhibit some of those traits. And so what we're trying to do is reel our curriculum back in, continue to teach reading, continue to teach math, the algorithmic drilling skill of mathematics. We still got to have these foundational skills. And I'm not against having highly intellectual and highly intelligent critical thinkers. I think this last bullet is the difference. That we can learn math, we can be engineers, we can be lawyers, but we can also be fishermen, and we can also be culturalists, and we also can be farmers with the same ethic that we're talking about here. That the ethics that we just don't do what we're doing to get something out of it. We don't do what we're doing just to get a high-paying job or just to live where we want to live. It's not always that simple. And along that road, we leave who we are. And I don't want to, for myself, I don't want the next generation to abandon where we come from. And so in that fear of abandonment, looking at academics and the focus on the core knowledge is important. But now we tag on this ethic that we can have all of these highly intellectual individuals. It's just, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to become an engineer to clean the plastic island that you have building in the Pacific? Or are we going to build the next nuclear bomb? And that's the ethic. So just making sure, especially for us on campus here, that this isn't, our vision moving forward is not about, again, abandoning the academic ship. It's about reshaping it and building the bridging from mainstream academics over to a more cultural indigenous worldview. And so with that, I kind of alluded to it, but this is the last, the main teaching that we are working on for right now at Waihona is relooking at all of our stories and relooking at our history and relooking at our moʻokuʻauhau of where we come from and challenging the children to see their kupuna and their ohana as experts and as intellectual and as researchers of knowledge. And the data that has been collected over those generations has helped us to survive to today. And we're still alive, and we're still here. Our environment has been hurting, but we got enough information that the kupuna left for us to help rebuild our ecology while we rebuild ourselves. And so that's where Waihona Naʻauao will be going. Okay, I'll open up for questions.